Hey, this is Evan Mark Katz, dating coach for smart, successful women, your personal trainer for love. Welcome back to the Love You podcast, where you can learn everything you need to know about dating, relationships, sex, and men from men's point of view. I'm constantly kind of tinkering with that opening line. Maybe next week it's going to be something different. I think the word in my head these days is community. That's sort of the thing that I'm on, and the people in the Love You community have really kind of been closer than ever. And by the end of this conversation, hopefully I'll share more about what it means to be part of the Love You community and how it can support you. In the meantime, before we get started today, if you are a fan, if you've been listening, we got some really nice reviews this week. I was reading, we were up to 500 Apple reviews, thanks to you. So if you want to be 501, go to Apple, go to Spotify, subscribe, say something nice about us, share us with your friends. It means the world. Today, I have my close friend Carol joining me for some interesting, important conversation. The topic is, I will admit this, I generally like to talk about what I want to talk about, but I did keyword research, and this was the keyword research thrown back at me from YouTube. It was the very cryptic giving chances in relationships. So you could read it as giving chances to relationships, giving chances to men. How do we give guys chances within the relationship? I'm going to leave it open to interpretation, but I'm going to start with the idea that it's not going to be about opening up to a different kind of guy. It's going to be like within the relationship, how do you continue to give a chance to a guy who never does exactly what you want him to do? With that, my friend Carol, who's been married for longer than I have, how do you, how do you how do you put up with the fact that no matter what you do, you've got a husband who has a set of opinions and ideas about how to move in the world that is different than yours? It's not right, it's not
Really?
wrong, but it's different. How do you give mulligans and second chances on a day-to-day basis to your spouse?
Oh boy, howdy. Well, the thing that matters the most is that people figure out the thing that matters the most. So the stuff that my husband doesn't do that I wish he did the way I do it, right? The stuff he doesn't do the way I want him to, or the stuff, none of it's the stuff that matters the most. The stuff that matters the most, like my core needs, my core requirements, my bare bottom basic standards, right? All that stuff he does great. It's the other stuff. So it's like you have to decide and you have to get really clear. What are your requirements and what are your preferences? And nobody's going to do things the way you prefer, but the people in your life better do things the way you require.
Okay, and you make it the terminology you're using is require and prefer.
Yeah.
I probably use the words wants versus needs.
Uh-huh.
Um, and the needs always land in sort of the same bucket: character, kindness, consistency, communication, commitment, right? How does he treat me? How do I feel around him? But I could also work back from that and think that when my wife sees that I'm doing something she doesn't like, she's thinking he doesn't value me, he doesn't respect me, he
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
care
yeah.
what I have to say.
Sure.
Somehow my different behavior is a sign not of I'm different, but rather a lack of love or respect.
Uh, Boy, howdy. That is a huge one. And I used to feel like that. I used to think that way. And I think I think it's a very, and no offense to your wife, I think it's a very young thing to think, right? I think it's young. I think it's kind of idealistic, it's kind of romantic. If he loved me, he would do everything the way I wish
He
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 would,
would he
right?
would put the dishes away the way I want to put the dishes away.
Yeah, right, right. And
But I've told you so many times, why
right.
can't you just listen?
Because I'm in charge, right?
Oh,
So I,
yeah.
I mean, I think every couple has some power struggles, right? But I think at a certain point you just have to decide, is it worth it? Is it worth it? And one of the things I say in my work is know who you're with. At the that ancient Greek oracle over the ark, it said, know thyself. Well, the second part of the sentence should have been, and then know who you're with. When you know who you're with and you know what they do and what they don't do and what's natural for them, you do take things a lot less personally. And to your point, if your wife has asked you again and again and again and again, and you're still doing it your way, guess what? You're still going to do it your way. And so she has to appreciate you,
Yeah,
your way.
I only use myself as an example. This is not an example of a struggling marriage. It's
Yeah,
more
yeah,
like
yeah.
the
Not at
in
all.
jokes that couples have,
For sure.
where I'm
For
taking
sure.
the kids. The kids. We went to the Getty Center this past weekend, and we mentioned that
Love it.
offline. Went to the
Yeah.
Getty Center.
Love it.
Um, and it was like, okay, kids, get in the car. We're going to the Getty Center. When mom's preparing, there's 45 minutes of prep to make sure that if it gets hot, there's change of clothes, there's something to put on. We bring water. We might bring snacks because it's really expensive there.
Sunscreen. Yeah.
Yeah, like sunscreen, totally. And when I got there, I was like, all right, we don't have water. I guess we're gonna have to buy the expensive water. Dad didn't think about that kind of thing. It's $7. All right, fine. I guess we're getting water. Oh, you want two waters? All right, it's gonna be an expensive water day. But that's the difference. So my wife is
Oh, you
usually
forgot a hat. Let's see if the gift shop
my
has
wife
hats.
is definitely more prepared. I'm just a little bit more efficient, if not rushed. And so these are the kind of things that sort of come up all the time. But to your point,
Yeah.
none of these things have anything to do with how we love each other, treat each other. It is
Yeah.
just differences of opinion about how much we value certain things.
Yeah.
But I suppose there are probably some things in relationships that can become larger, right? If the difference is how two people spend money,
Mhm.
or if the difference is, one person likes sex once a month and one wants it 3 times a week. There are probably things where the
Yeah.
gap between people's differences can be relationship threatening.
Oh, for sure. And the whole thing about giving people chances, you work with smart, strong, successful women. You tend to work with high achievers, high performers, high functioners. I, being a Vedic astrologer, I tend to attract spiritual women, and spiritual women tend to be more sensitive.
Mm.
So what I get a lot of is women who are just very open-hearted, very sensitive, they follow their feelings. And what can be very hard for them about this idea of like, what do you give a chance to and what do you say no to, is if they really feel a connection to a guy, if they really like a guy or love a guy, then their ability to set boundaries
Set
and really
boundaries.
ask
Yeah.
for what they need goes right out the window.
Right.
And so while you probably have a lot of conversations with women about like, hey, let that go, and hey, is that really important, and hey, you got to accept men for who they are, I'm having a lot of conversations like, hey, you really shouldn't be allowing that, and hey, that's really not healthy, and hey,
I think that's an amazing point. And
yeah,
on top of that point, one of the things that I've noticed is, we talked about your clients, where we raise clients, right? More
yeah,
likely to be the soft, squishy doormat who will, if she loves a guy, he gets whatever she wants. Her needs go out the
yeah,
window. Uh, I would probably guess half of my clients fit that same profile. That
right,
on the outside they are achievers, but within a
right,
relationship, due to whatever environment they grew up around, right?
uh-huh,
They're the placaters, right?
right,
And so there's the thing you said definitely speaks to the people who turn to me as well. It's
yes,
when you love someone,
yeah,
it becomes hard to say no because you're afraid
right,
that saying no is going to blow up the relationship. And
yeah, you don't want to lose the love,
yeah.
right, yeah,
I want to briefly pivot the conversation,
okay,
because I can imagine someone saw the title of this and said giving chances in relationships, and they actually thought we were talking about the other kind of giving chances in relationships, like who do we give a chance to,
hmm,
which is genuinely equally important, if not
uh-huh,
if not more important. First, you
uh-huh,
have to choose the right person to annoy you within your relationship, but choosing the right person is important. And do you have any sort of top level advice about how people can be open to people where they don't feel like they're bending over backwards, they don't feel like they're settling? How do you nudge people to making better decisions when, hey, every guy they've ever chosen has been the, domineering guy who wasn't sensitive to your needs, and if
uh,
you keep choosing him, then, well, obviously, what's going to happen.
right. Well, I have a lot of conversation with people that are about childhood and developmental years, 0 to 7, 0 to 3. Was dad around? What was dad like? Because what we all tend to do, I mean, it's so trite but true, is we all tend to recreate what we knew as children. We all tend to go home again. So people think we're going to just talk about astrology or coaching, but I bring in a lot of psychology. I bring in culture, like what ethnicity are you? What are they? What national background were your grandparents? What were they? What part of the country are you from? What part are they? Where are you in your birth order? As you and I have talked about, where are they? All of these things bring so much to it. Uh, and so, but I think to your point, we all kind of have a type that we're drawn to, that we like. I'll never forget when I met my husband, one of my friends said, "Don't tell me skinny, brown hair, blue eyes, no butt." And that's totally my husband, right? And then if you look at pictures of his old girlfriends or his high school sweetheart, we all look like sisters, right? And so, now that's physical, but we all have behavioral stuff too that we're drawn to. And it's just true. But I think what really matters is getting clear again on what do you require, asking enough questions about people's backgrounds and their other relationships, because people
Wait,
that are,
who's asking these questions?
when you're first meeting each other, you should have these
Yeah,
kind of
I don't love
conversations
that.
over time. I don't mean on date one. I love your advice. Like, don't interview someone. See if date one is about seeing if there's enough fun, and if you can connect and feel like you want to go on date two. I agree with that, but you do want to pay attention, because people will tell you, and maybe they tell you in a funny way or an offhanded way, but they will tell you things like, "Oh yeah, everyone at work's difficult," or, "Oh yeah, I haven't talked to my mom in 5 years." I mean, you wouldn't believe how honest people are in early dating and how open they
Oh,
will be.
I get that. I think
Yeah.
it the subtle distinction I make between what you're sharing and what I'm sharing is
Yes.
that um there's a difference between showing genuine curiosity about people
Yes. Yes. Yes.
and trying to solve them like there's some sort of puzzle based on a series of questions. And there's
Agreed.
always the temptation to do the latter
Yes.
instead of the former, which is just, this is how people exchange information. This is how people close, they
Yes.
reveal themselves.
Yeah.
But if you go in looking for dirt, you're probably going to find something.
Well, but to your point of the question, if you have a history of like always being with the domineering, like bossy guy who ends up squelching you, right? Then you want to pay attention to what cues he's giving, because women always tell me things later like, "I knew it was wrong, but I kept going," or, "He said that huge thing that I ignored." Right?
Right. And so that brings me back to where I wanted to steer the conversation,
Okay.
which was getting women to listen to their feelings,
Yes, for
right?
sure.
Which is different than a list of questions, and maybe there may be an overlap, but it's
Right.
really because people come to us, and the biggest thing that think they lack is trust in their own judgment. And
Hmm.
Evan, yesterday, Evan, I don't even know. Like, I've done the therapy and I've read the books. I'm self-aware. I'm a psychologist myself. I have no idea what's in my blind spot. All I know is I'm 37. It's not working.
Hmm.
Right. So
Yeah.
they need something to anchor onto. And sometimes the advice is actually simple, is you should never have to talk yourself, when we're talking about giving chances in relationships, you should never have to talk yourself into going out with someone. And you talk about people who, like, I don't know. I mean, I was told not to go out with these toxic narcissist guys and these other guys, and I'm like, I mean, he's nice. I mean, I mean, maybe I should give him a chance. I've never heard a story about a woman talking herself into a date and that turning into something. There probably is one, but for the most part, if
Uh-huh.
you're talking yourself into it, that's you ignoring your own feelings that you don't want to be there.
Well, I don't know. I mean, what I always say is, unless a guy really doesn't do it for you, or you're uncomfortable, or he's offensive, right? I do like people giving things a chance,
If you're
you know?
plainly unattracted to him, you'd say go out with him a second time. If you
Well, I just said, unless he really doesn't do it for you. So that means unattractive, right? But if you're like, if you're like, what I worry about is people wanting to be blown away, right? Or wanting to be
agreed.
wowed. And I think I always talk about there's two kinds of ways of falling in love. There's struck by lightning and there's struck by moss. And lightning is that like, you know, cross a crowded room, like thunderclap,
Sure.
like, oh my God, oh my God. But moss is where it just kind of keeps growing on you and growing on you and growing on you. But you had no idea in the beginning it would ever be what it turns into.
I
And I will
completely agree.
say that happened to me. That was my marriage. Like we met, we were both like, huh. And we both felt like comfortable and familiar, but neither one of us was blown away. He did say that he saw me and he went, "Oh no, there's my wife." But he was not struck by lightning. We were not like madly in
Sure.
love or anything. And honestly, it took like 6 months to really fall for each other. And then it was a year before I really knew how solid it could be. So I think people I worry that people, especially with the internet and online dating and apps, that people have these expectations that are too fast.
Agreed. And,
Yeah.
and you're
Yeah.
literally echoing the theme of another podcast I did about the two ways to fall in love.
Oh, I love it. That's great. I didn't know
It's
that.
very
That's great.
specifically with, no, I'm saying this not surprising that we agree.
Right.
Very specifically with online dating. There's the guy who's like after one date, he's like, I'm taking down my profile. You're the one. And she's like,
Yeah.
whoa. And then there's the guy who's keeping his options open, talking to people, and you slowly emerge as the favorite.
Love
And
it.
there are stories on both of them, but I would rather be in the second category because you're less
Yes.
likely to make a mistake if you're vetting a candidate for, say, a month before he becomes your boyfriend or before you start sleeping with him. But again, we converge at the same point. When we're talking about giving chances in relationships, I think there's a race. And the voice in women's head. I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to waste time. I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to waste time.
And I don't want to hurt anyone else. That's the third thing everyone says.
Yeah, being so nice you stay in a relationship that doesn't serve you, and that's not really that doesn't help everybody.
No.
How should people assess whether something is a deal breaker within that relationship? Again, it's circling back to sort of where we started.
Uh-huh.
I always say two things. You can't do the wrong thing with the right guy. If a guy's making a big deal about something little and he won't let it go, then that's how he's going to handle lots of conflict. Right. And then sort of conversely, men do what they want. As to your point, if he's doing something, this is the way he is. If all he wants to do is see you
Yeah.
on Friday night and he's a long distance guy and he texts you once a week, that is the relationship he wants. You wanting more, wishing for more, trying to cajole him to more doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
So just pay attention to really almost like how the puzzle pieces feed. It almost doesn't matter how much you like someone. It's how well the system works.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Totally agree. Yeah. I always say, as an astrologer, each person has a chart, but each relationship has a chart. And so you might be great. They might be great, but maybe the combination of the two of you short circuits. And that can be really baffling and mystifying. But yeah, how people show up for you is as important as who they are themselves. And so this is why it's complicated. This is why it's a tall order.
But there's always the temptation where people think that love will conquer all,
Uh-huh.
or that, or it's. I'm looking at from the position of being a coach helping women. He'll change, right? Like that's the story. Is I could change him. The sort of redemptive power of love if he loved
Hmm.
me enough.
Yeah.
Or things were really great at the beginning and he'll go back to what he was like at the beginning, but the beginning was the audition. Who he is now is who he really is. Like this is the real him.
Yeah.
So I always say, don't, like if you could preserve your relationship now, like bronze it, this is it forever. Would you stay in this relationship? And 95 out of 100 times, the answer is no.
Mm.
Assuming he's not going to be any different than he is now. This thing you're complaining, the reason you reached out to a dating coach, this thing, he is a whatever. He's a workaholic. He has anger issues. He's dismissive of my opinion. He doesn't make enough time for me. He certainly doesn't make me feel safe, heard, and understood. Right? How can I make him become someone that he's not? You hear things like this undoubtedly.
Well, this is why, and I know it's not, your area at all, but it's why I love astrology is because people can present really well for a while and they can do the tap dance and the, but I can see who they really are and can they sustain all that good mojo, or is it over time going to get more difficult, or is it over time going to get better? And I will say you and I differ a little in that I am really a believer that everyone has an amazing intuition, like an amazing, it's not just our feelings, it's our deeper knowing that we need to really tap into in dating. And sometimes your deeper knowing is telling you to stay in a situation that maybe doesn't fit your picture or maybe isn't your perfect list, but there's like a gift in it for you. And so I don't want to say like I want to encourage people to stay in unhealthy things, because of course not. But I will say I do think sometimes having perfect formulas on things when doesn't always work, and making people get out of things doesn't always work if they're not complete. So anyway, so it's a little bit tricky supporting women. And the thing I always say is, what do you know? Like, what is your heart really telling you? Is your heart really telling you this could get better, or is that your desire telling you that? Right? But things do sometimes get better. They actually do. I'll tell a really quick story. My husband has a best friend, and he met his wife when he had just been dumped by a woman he really loved. And he was a mess when he met his wife. But they hit it off. And she took one look at him, and her inner knowing and her street smarts and her experience said, this guy's great. And this guy is important, but he's a mess. She could just smell it, right? And she said, give it 6 months. So for 6 months, they were just friends. And he would call and he'd go out with someone else. And then he'd show up at her door at 9 o'clock and they'd make popcorn and laugh. And then he'd leave. And then they'd go on a date and then he'd be weird. I mean, he was all over the place. Well, they've been married 15 years now. And at the 6-month mark, he went, what am I doing? I'm in love with her, right? Like he got it, like the penny dropped. So what I love about that story is it didn't necessarily fit what you would have told her or what I would have told her. It fit what her knowing told her. And this is where sometimes our job is tricky. It's really tricky.
I don't think we are, this isn't a hard science, right?
Yes.
It's not physics or biology, but
Right.
it's a soft science. And
Yeah.
so she chose, and I've got stories like that too.
Of
She
course you
chose
do.
to stick it out with the guy for 6 months who is
Yeah.
who is not fully emotionally available,
Yes.
and trust her gut instinct.
Yeah.
My version of that, because I have that. I've got a client who's in her 70s. She met a guy who was recently widowed. He was within the first year. They had a really strong connection. He couldn't give her what she needed. She wanted the whole relationship, and he liked her, but. And
Yeah.
after a couple months of this, I didn't say stick around and be his best friend. I said, let him go,
Yeah.
right? And let him know if and when he gets his act together, and if and when you're still available at that point in time, you'd be glad to entertain that. Dude came back 6 months later. Now they're living together. So for me, it was,
Amazing.
but again, it's not a right or a wrong.
Yeah.
I'm just more inclined to say, hey, right now and for the indefinite future, he can't be the person you want. And those
Right.
are 6 months theoretically, you could be looking at someone else.
Right.
So I'm glad they have a happy ending, but I
Yeah.
still would have steered her to a guy who's presently emotionally available. And I think
Yeah.
that's sort of my job. It's not to negate the beauty of that story.
Yeah.
It's you're banking on him changing. right? You're banking on his evolution. Well, what if it takes him 2 years to get back on his feet after
Yeah,
divorce? So
right.
that's the thing. It's a little, to me, broken clock is right twice a day. It
Yeah.
was right. It's a lovely story that I'm sure they love to trot out to people. It's as a coach, choosing a guy who's a mess feels risky to me.
Well, she didn't sit on a shelf. She still dated other people
Got it.
too.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would never let a woman just date that guy.
Okay. And yeah, obviously we don't
Important piece of the puzzle I didn't provide.
we
Yeah.
do not have to come to full consensus. The article I wanted to talk about this week was about, and again, I don't know if this is the right alley, or if this is something you even want to talk about, but the idea of what it means to be a non-parent in a world of parents. Um,
Hey,
because I have
hey.
I've got a lot of clients who, for whatever reason, either chose not to have kids,
Yeah,
couldn't have kids. There sometimes, life makes decisions for you.
yeah.
So there's this New York Times piece about this, written by Glenys McNichol, and it was, again, with the tenor of American politics, right? The childless cat ladies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
This article is sort of exploring, the value of people who are not parents and what they give to their communities and what they give to children. I wanted to sort of throw it to you and see what your thoughts were. I'm just a generic,
Well, I fit
this
that
this
story.
white guy in the suburb with
Yeah,
2 kids. It's not a
right.
unique story. So
Well, I fit the profile perfectly. I'm sitting here with Tiger, my gray Tiger tabby, and my empty womb that has always been empty. Yeah, so well, it Liz Gilbert, the writer of Eat,
sure,
Pray, Love, and 10 books, not just Eat, Pray, Love. She wrote a book called Committed, and she talks in Committed about
I
something
read it.
she
Yeah,
calls the Auntie Brigade. And the Auntie Brigade is the fact that throughout history, a whopping 10% of women have not had children for whatever reason, biological, not getting married, you know, a whopping 10%. And they become completely important in families and in communities as another set of hands because they're available, so they provide a lot of support and attention to other people's children. And that's what that article was about. And she went through all the children in her life who have been so important, and all the births she's been to, and graduations, and a lot of us, that's our story. And I think it's not a role to be minimized. I mean, I've been an aunt to 3 kids, and 2 of them I've always lived near, and I've spent thousands of hours with these kids. I mean, thousands. And one of them still lives with me in a trailer in my backyard, and he's 27. And I have 3 godchildren that I see all the time. I was just over last week with 2 of them for one of their birthdays, and and I have had these children say to me, I don't know what I would have done without you when I
Mhm.
was younger. Like, and I've had my godchildren write me letters like, you have been such a mom to me. And so it's sad when people minimize or poo-poo people that don't have kids, because of course men do the same thing. My husband's been amazing to these kids. So, it takes a village to raise a kid. It takes a village to raise all of us. And all of our villages have childless people, and they matter too. They matter too.
No, I'm struck by something in the article. It says 64% of women under 50 who don't have children say they just don't want to,
Uh-huh.
which again is not right or wrong. I mean, I think this is,
Yeah.
raising a child is not something one should take lightly. It's a full-time gig. It's expensive. It eats up a lot of your time and resources, and so
Yeah.
it's definitely not a wrong. It's not a wrong choice. It's a personal choice. I think what's surprising, I guess this sort of falls in the category of how, because of tradition, the way things were, the old roles, women who didn't get married, women who didn't have kids were the other. It was such a minority, right? It
Yeah.
was It was
Yeah.
10% maybe historically, where
Yeah.
that number, I don't know the actual number now. I probably should have done a little bit of internet research, but my guess is that that number is much greater than 10% now. Um,
Mm.
last I heard, I think 80% of people still get married. I still, as much as they talk about the death of marriage, I still think 80% of people eventually get married.
Yeah.
Um, but I would assume that a good portion of them don't have children. And again, think of the friends we have in common, right? Virtually none of them have kids, right? In the self-help industry where their
Well,
business,
we hang out with other entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs are like exhausted.
yeah, their business is their baby.
Is
Their
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 baby.
their, their
Totally.
clients are their clients are their kids,
Totally. Yeah.
right? And they also contribute to their families as,
Yeah.
as aunts and things like that. I just think it's one of those things where it's important to talk about that for women who feel marginalized or judged by society.
Yeah.
I
I
think
never did. Nobody ever gave me a hard time, ever.
I'm glad you said that
I
because
never
I,
felt weird.
I kind of agree, but
Yeah.
you never want to take anybody's point of view away. I've got a decent number of clients
Yeah.
who feel marginalized and or attacked
Mm.
by either parental pressure
Hmm.
or the I don't fit in the couples world, the dinner parties, like I'm a plus one. I've largely been excluded from that world.
True.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I think again, that's what I like. And again, I know you do retreats. That's one of the things I like about creating community is I work with a
Yeah.
whole bunch of women who are that woman, right? They're either empty nesters, right? And they're flying, and divorced, flying solo, and they're not part of the couples world anymore, or they might be, 60, never married, right? And are lonely and trying to figure out how to navigate this thing. Maybe there was a time in their life they thought they didn't want it. They focused on their career and their travel, and
Yeah.
then they kind of wake up or look up, not wake up, but look up and discover, I kind of liked the independence for a while, but now it feels a little lonely. And so
True.
having other people who are sort of fellow travelers on that is just really important because I think dating is very much a solo sport.
Yeah. Well, and it can feel really lonely to come home after yet another boring date or bad date to your empty place and be like, oh my God, what am I doing? Um, but I think part of why I never got a lot of pressure for it is I'm in a coastal city,
Mm.
and I grew up in a coastal city, and I went to college in a coastal city. So it's definitely different in smaller places, Midwestern places, middle of the country place. It's definitely different. And you know, uh what I always try to tell people is bring what you want. So if you wanted kids and you don't have them, or you want kids, find somebody's kids you can hang out with. I promise
Yeah.
you, they're all around you, and they would love to get to know you. And you might just find in hanging out with kids that you're so grateful you don't have kids, right? Or you might find,
Great birth control is to
yes.
babysit some toddlers.
I mean, it's the reason I didn't want them is I started babysitting at 12. I started in my neighborhood babysitting neighborhood kids. And I got really clear really early. This was really hard work. And this was all day, all night. This was not a like 9 to 5 job. And then I worked in nursery schools, and then I was a teacher's aide, and then. So by the time I was 23, I was like, that is not for me. And it's really been the right decision for me. But again, I had all these other kids that filled that void. And so I think it's easier when you have people to be an auntie to. But it's a totally personal thing. And I'll tell you, as an astrologer, you can see if people will have kids. When I was 32, my astrology mentor looked at my chart, and even though I decided I didn't want them, my husband and I had been talking about maybe adopting, and maybe, and we worked with foster kids for years. And my mentor looked at my chart. He said, no, you're not going to have a child. You're not going to adopt. You're not going to have any children living with you as your children ever. And I was so freaked out. I was like, whoa, it's one thing to not want something. It's another thing to have it sort of taken away. But he's proven to be right. And he said, and you'll never regret it. And you'll always be captivated by other stuff you're doing. So, and here I am, captivated by you, Evan Mark Katz. What about you? Do you regret it deeply? Do you want to get rid of those kids?
And that's the thing.
Kidding, of course. Bad
no,
joke.
no, but I think I went to bar trivia last night and I got into an accidentally polarizing conversation
No, you?
but I wasn't the polarizing one.
I'm kidding.
I was the even-tempered one. And it was about the Middle East, and someone
Oh, okay.
had very
Yeah.
strong opinions, and I was taking down
Phew.
down the temperature. And so I think we live in a world where you express an opinion that disagrees with someone's opinion, and that becomes
Yeah.
right, the tyranny of small differences. That becomes the thing that they try to divide or hang you with.
Yeah.
I know you know that. And
Boy, howdy do I.
no, and so I mean
Yeah.
that's why I try to be careful when I'm talking about things that aren't about me,
Yeah.
to never sound remotely judgmental of someone who's made different life choices that work for
Yeah.
them, right? And people perceive judgment even where there isn't any. So if you're
Yeah.
a dating coach and you want to cite statistics, and there's infinite ones,
Yeah.
plenty of evidence that people who are happily married are the happiest people of all. There's nothing wrong with being single,
Yeah.
but I don't know anybody who's single. If you add love into their life, they're going to be less happy. Good, healthy love, right?
Yes.
So love becomes additive, and so that's a thing. But sometimes people will feel like, oh, so you're judging me for being a single woman.
Right.
And I think that's part of what happens with the kids. Like people who are parents are obviously evangelical about the power of parenthood, and
Yeah.
I think there'd be probably only a handful of people on the planet who would regret having their kids. Almost every divorced woman who is in a miserable marriage is like, well, at least he gave me
At
my
least
kids,
I got these great
right?
kids.
Like,
Yeah,
so,
I hear that
I
every
mean,
day. Yes.
everybody loves
Yeah.
their kids the way you love your cats. Maybe
Oh,
as
hopefully more. Hopefully
maybe
more.
as much. So it's very easy to be preachy about it, and
Yeah.
I think it's just, hopefully you're happy with the choices that you've made, and you've made the best of those choices. Um,
Right.
I don't think there's only one way to be. Once you had kids, I think it would be unfathomable to imagine your life without children.
Uh-huh.
So kids become sort of like a fork in the road for someone. I mean, I have, and maybe you still do, clients in the late 30s, early 40s who want kids, and they're at
Yeah.
this sort of fork in the road saying, well, this is the life I really want, but I might have to make peace with the fact that I'm not going to get that. And what does that look like?
Or I might have to change my whole life to get that.
Right. I think
Yeah,
that's probably one of the tougher times for women, at least
for
certainly my
sure.
clients, to be late 30s, early 40s, and
For
always
sure.
envision yourself as a mother and realize it's not totally within my control. I'm going to do whatever I can,
Yeah.
right? But I'll get more clients who are 39 than 31, right? That's because they're feeling a great sense of pressure about achieving what their dream, and then subsequently potentially having to let go of their dream, or the dream takes on a different form.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting looking at stats and things. You can always find a study to support your point of view too.
Right.
There's a study that says, worldwide women report the thing that makes them happiest is children. And then when you look at the hard data of who lives the
People
longest
without children are
and
happier.
is the healthiest, unmarried women with no children live longer than married women with children.
Right. Or yeah,
Yeah.
I've read similar things.
Yeah.
I haven't heard the thing about unmarried women, but I've definitely
Yeah.
because I thought marriage often correlated with longer life, but I could be mistaken.
Well, you said a great word. You said happy marriages.
Yes.
And if you just look at marriage,
Yeah.
the data on marriage is men benefit more, and
Yes.
men report being happier, and women report being less happy than single women. Married women report being less happy than single women. And so one of the problems women have, one of the great things about women, but one of the problems with women is we tend to pour ourselves into our relationships more than men as a group, speaking sweeping generalizations here, but we pour ourselves in. And so a lot of women have a hard time saying, what do I want? What do I need? How can I get more of what I want and need here and still be a team player? And and that's a whole other podcast episode. But yeah, for anyone listening and hearing like, oh wow, married women are so much happier. Happily married women are so much happier.
Right.
They think it's about a third of marriage.
Right. And so I'm with you on that. And that's why my goal when I've been accused of, whatever, matrimania, wanting everybody to be married.
Right.
I don't want more marriages. I want more happy marriages. I would rather,
yes.
I'm the first person to tell people to break up if it's so much work. I don't spend a lot of time on couples in early phase dating, going to couples counseling 3 months in. I'm sure there's an easier relationship out there. But you're right. And so there's more women who are opting out of marriage.
Yes.
Another conversation, but they're opting out of marriage, even though marriage itself isn't the problem. It's the men they're choosing to marry. Marriage as an institution is sort of neutral. It's just a commitment to each other. So marry well, right? You could be, the top 10% of happy people in the world. Marry poorly, you're better off being single. And so a lot of people
a
lot of people just don't have the faith that they can make a good choice. And that's, to the validation of our respective existence. Always talk about small wins, something good that happened in the lives of your clients this week. Carol, anybody you're working with have a small win that you could share with us today?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So I have a client that just went on her first vacation with a guy that she's been seeing for a couple of months. And what's a win for her is she usually does the lightning strikes thing and opens up really quickly and gets attached really fast. And then her expectations are really high. And with this one, she's been being more sober, more careful, more like taking things as they come, letting him reveal himself. And so she said to me, I really like him. There's no red flags, but he's not coming on like all effusive and all super romantic. So she thought maybe it was a little like, she was just a little, because she's used to lightning and he's showing up like moss. And so they had an amazing trip and everything was great. And he started being even sweeter and even more, calling her names of endearment. And so I'm just so proud of her because the old her would have actually thought something was the matter and would have brought a lot more doubt and a lot more like, what's wrong kind of questions to him.
Yeah.
And instead, she's just enjoying it and really happy. So I'm so proud of her.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. And I will admit, because I'm on my desktop, I've got a whole bunch of things open. And while we were on the phone, I received an email, right? It's 10:52 right now. This email came in at 10:51. Again.
Amazing.
I haven't read it in full because you were talking. Hi, Evan. Long time no see. I felt you were due an update from our Love You days. This past weekend, I got engaged.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
To a former intern in Love You. Men are interns, women are CEOs. To a former intern turned fiance that I met during the time I was in Love You. Our relationship is fun and easy. When my dad first met him, he told me the thing he likes most about him is that he's naturally happy and laughs easily. I think about this often because he always makes me feel more positive. He's also there for me through life's turns. This past year, he stood beside me when I froze my eggs and when my dad died. To be honest, I was getting impatient with getting engaged as I'm almost 39, but he always reassured me that he wants marriage and kids, and I believed him. We've been together for 3.5 years. I want to thank you for giving me hope when I was waiting for the one. As you told us, it's always darkest before the dawn. And then she shared a picture of her engagement and told me not to use her name. So,
wow, chills.
Yeah, we'll call that a big win for today, and that's
wow, that is huge and so well timed. I
was not planning on that. I
love it when that happens.
I had that in my back pocket. Okay, here's my engagement story, but it literally just came in.
Love it.
Carol, where could everybody find you?
I am at loveisinthestars.com.
And she's got lots of customized special astrology reports not just a generic ebook, but something that is customized for you based on your birth date and things that I can't
Yeah.
possibly understand. But she's been doing this forever, and she's
34 years, baby.
also an OG, and so
Yeah.
definitely check out Carol's work.
Thank you.
My name is Evan Mark Katz, and this is the Love You Podcast. Two things I want to share with you. Number one, if you haven't already gotten on my mailing list, go to evanmarkkatz.com/7steps.com. evanmarkkatz.com/7steps. And you can take my free mini course about raising your standards on how to attract higher quality, commitment oriented men. It's 7 steps, 7 little videos in 7 days. And hopefully it'll give you my whole love philosophy in a really short period of time for absolutely free. And if you are serious about finding love right now, go to get a free dating and relationship assessment. We keep on changing URLs around here, but you could probably go to evanmarkkatz.com/coaching or click on one of the links in the show notes. That should probably take you there. Other than that, follow us on Spotify, follow us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, subscribe, tell your friends, and thank you so much for being a part of the Love You Podcast. I want to thank Carol Allen for being here and being such a great friend. There's a reason we keep having her back for more. She's really good at what she does and provides a lot of insight and doesn't have the exact same things to say that I do. So we're going to continue to see more of Carol, and I look forward to seeing you guys on the next podcast. Bye-bye.